Welcome everybody. I'm Michael Naylor, calling from South Portland, Maine, and I'm the director of the Enneagram Center for Transformation and Well-Being. And today I'm going to talk with Nimali, a beloved Type 4 in my same ancestral Enneagram line, and hear about the agony and the ecstasy. Welcome, and so glad to have you here. And would just love to hear about a bit about your life, where you are today, and then your journey with the Enneagram.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thanks for inviting me over. The
Absolutely.
Enneagram is like a love language for me, so I definitely love speaking about the Enneagram. Um, so my name is Namali. I am an executive coach. I have been that for a very long time now, probably close to 7 to 10 years, and a little bit more in general in the people development domain, so to say. I am originally from Sri Lanka, but I have been living in the United States since about 20 years now. Um, and in quintessential Enneagram 4 style, of course, I didn't know that then. Growing up, I was very fascinated with things that looked beautiful somehow. And for me as a little girl, I was a very girly girl. So I used to play with dolls, and I got very interested in making clothes for the dolls, and I got very interested in the technical aspect of making creative things as well. And so the first time that I came to the US was actually my previous career, which was that I was a fashion designer. So I got a degree from FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology. I went home and I built a little business back in Sri Lanka in fashion design. So right off the bat, the creative domain was my domain. It was just such a rich time of color and texture and just making women look beautiful in what I would design for them and make for them. And so and then eventually, as I grew a little bit older, actually, as a result of my dad's death, I got interested in psychology and spirituality and that kind of thing. So I actually left my fashion business aside and I moved back to the US, this time to Boulder, Colorado, primarily because I had discovered the work of Ken Wilber, an American author. And it's through him and his teachings, because he speaks about 5 key aspects of reality, and I'm not going to get into them, but types are one of those aspects that we relate to reality through our personality type, for example. It's just a simple way of saying it for the purpose of this call. So I started exploring the Enneagram probably about 18 years or so ago. So a long time, long enough, I think. And I can't remember the author's book, the who the author was that I like, whose book I read first. It's been so long that I don't remember. It wasn't like The Wisdom of the Enneagram or some of the sort of the more well-known books. Um, but yeah, when I read Type 4, it was like, boom, this is it. It's like all the check marks. Yeah. I have a
Yeah.
5 wing,
Mhm.
very strong 5 wings. So I really straddle the world of feelings and also the world of the intellect and the heady stuff, which is what Ken Wilber's work is actually quite heady.
Mhm.
But I always absorb all of it from in a very heart-centered space. I think that's really interesting. It doesn't stay in the head for me, it comes to the heart.
Mhm.
And then the
Mhm.
way that I sort of embody that or enact these heady theories and philosophies that I might get into is much more from a heart-centered space.
Thank you. So when you reflect upon your journey as a Type 4, um, what would you say some of the challenges have,
Mhm.
have been for you?
I think, I'm sure there's many, but I think the one that sticks out the most, unique Enneagram 4 characteristic is probably that idea that something is missing. Something is missing, and I am uniquely suffering because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I don't necessarily am ever quite capable of pointing a finger at saying that's what's wrong with me, or that's what's missing, or that's what I'm lacking. But rather, it's just this consistent sense of always feeling like something must have gone wrong somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
where something didn't quite align for me. Everyone else has it. She
Yeah.
has it, he has it, they have it, they all have it, except I don't, and I never will. And so I'm gonna suffer forever.
This is going to be a sad story, but I will like it.
I think one other place that I probably find it challenging, really, it shouldn't be that challenging, but somehow I'm caught in that challenge, which is the sense of belonging. So, as a Sri Lankan, when I lived in Sri Lanka, I was constantly telling myself, I don't know if I'm really Sri Lankan and if I really belong in Sri Lanka. And I kind of feel like a misfit here.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved to the US and I'm in New York and then I'm in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I have lived the last 20 years. There's always that nagging feeling, I'm not sure if I really fit here. I don't belong here. I'm too
Yeah.
Asian or, so I just never know where I really belong, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm very familiar with both of those. The sense of something's wrong, something's missing, but I don't know what it is. It's like, what's this all about? I've got this missing feeling, but it's intangible. I can't put my hands up. There's nothing I can do to get rid of it necessarily, but it can shake my confidence up in the moment. Um, and it's gotten over time quieter and quieter, but it can still pop up as an emptiness, a sense of there's an emptiness, and I don't my one of my teachers said, Michael, it's just emptiness. You don't have to build a cathedral to it. I said, but I must. I must. It's my cathedral of emptiness. So yeah, then the not belonging. I just noticed, how it's like such an unconscious pattern. But so I might be going along feeling, when I'm feeling good, I feel connected, and so I've got an AA meeting I go to, and 4 out of 7 days when I'm there, I feel like I'm apart, and then 3 out of 7, I go, I don't belong here. That feeling I don't belong. Well, how long have you been going to this meeting? Well, about 18 years. So it's just a quirky little thing. It just pops up, and I usually notice, oh, that's my pattern, and I start to feel like I'm not understood and I'm different, or and they don't get me, and blah blah. It's like a little recording that goes around. So do you notice? Is there anything that you've learned to do, or a way of being with it that helps you? How have you navigated that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sometimes I am more intentionally trying to do something that sort of gets me out of that rut.
Mm-hmm.
For example, something just because now I'm so familiar with this pattern that I'm much more faster, I can sort of tap into that much more faster. And so I can just kind of try to like shake it off and like normally get over it. It's like you're absolutely exactly like everyone else. there's nothing so special about you. Like, get over yourself. And I mean, that's really helpful, actually, just to be tough. In some sense, almost like speak to myself like the Enneagram one.
Hmm.
Just get
Kind of
practical
like,
with this.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just like stop it. Yeah. Other times, though, I'll also just leverage some of those things that I'm actually good at as an Enneagram 4, such as authenticity, for example. And I will actually just allow myself to feel what I'm feeling.
Hmm.
And I don't no longer need to be so held a prisoner to that. If I'm unaware of it, I think that's where I'm held prisoner to my subjective experience. But I think um now I mean, in all the years of work that I've done, it has become a lot easier to just give it space. It's okay, like if you feel like you don't belong here, or if you feel like something's wrong with you, or that something's missing in you, that's okay. That's your reality in this moment. That's how you're feeling. And
Hmm.
so let's just sit with that. And then sometimes it's just gentle things, like I'll take my dog for a walk and
Hmm.
just get into the body a little,
Hmm.
without making it like some mad rush to get out of this truth of the moment. I'll do
Hmm.
gentler things. Sometimes I'll actually, like if I'm feeling sad or something, I'll actually just go right into, I'm gonna listen to sad music while I'm walking my dog today. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
actually very honoring somehow of,
I like that. Yeah, yeah. So with these particular patterns, uh, I can remember I was bemoaning my patterns and how uniquely I struggled, and my teacher said, "Well, just think of this: only 1 in 9 people on the planet is probably a type 4. So you belong to some group that has quite a few numbers to it." I
yeah.
said, "Oh no, that couldn't be. I might be the only 4 that exists as far as I can see." But so when you were a little girl growing up, did
Mhm.
you have any particular memories around how your fourness and how you navigated life and all of that?
Yeah, guess what? I think this is perfect, because sometimes they say who you were enamored with as a child pointed towards what your own inclinations and type might have been. So when I was a little girl, I was enamored with, guess who? Michael Jackson. And Prince.
Uh,
And Prince, right?
yeah, yeah.
So there you go. It's like I was so obsessed with them somehow. And also Freddie Mercury, but I don't think Freddie Mercury was a 4. Um, he was he was way more in his body than I think a 4 could have been. But the Michael Jackson and the Prince obsession as a kid was really indicative, I think. But
Mm.
also I really loved things like ballet and like
Mm.
I even as a little girl, I loved what I saw as refined art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, like classical music.
Mm.
Um, just even in my own little way, I was making my little bedroom really beautiful, and I would want it to look a certain way, and put all
Mm.
my dolls in a certain place, and just very sort of aesthetically driven, aesthetically motivated. Yeah.
Yeah. So you notice that and attune to it, and we're drawn towards kind of cultivating it, right? It's a kind of aesthetic environment. So when you were going, grade school, high school, did sometimes, for as I know myself, I often felt like I was more sensitive than the kids around me. I would be hurt more deeply, at least in my perception, right? But how did your sensitivity come through during those uh,
Yeah.
challenging time, so to speak, especially high school.
Yeah. I think uh, first of all, I think I remember just being a kid who cried a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think I'm still like, cry at the movies, kind of just very sensitive. But I think more than anything, my sensitivity was really just how emotionally, I think as even a child, I was pretty emotionally attuned
Hmm.
to what was going on. So, for example, if my dad raised his voice, and especially if he might have raised his voice towards my mom, then I definitely just felt a sort of a brokenness, like a brokenheartedness towards
Hmm.
my mom.
Yeah.
And like wanting to protect her, or I would feel just as like a general childlike way of experiencing sadness, fear, just the emotions were very vivid and true
Hmm.
for me, I think. Um, and the speaking of emotions, obviously for a four, the topic of shame is big, right? So I still remember this probably traumatized me, but when I was a little kid, um, as early as maybe age 3, apparently I would sit at the piano and start playing tunes that I would hear on the radio.
Hmm.
So I had a very natural ability to just play proper
Oh,
piano. Yeah.
cool. Oh.
So my mom had probably felt, oh, Molly seems to have a talent for music, perhaps. So maybe it's good for me to send her to a music class. So there was a nearby piano lessons teacher. I still remember her. I used to call her, her name was Mary. So I still remember. This is in Sri Lanka.
Mhm.
Uh, Mari, actually, Marie. And in Sri Lanka, we say Mari. Auntie Mari is how we refer to. And in Sri Lanka, every woman is an auntie. We refer to them as
Oh,
aunties,
oh,
even if they're not related to us.
oh.
So I started going to Auntie Mari's piano classes, and I was in like the little kids class, and then one by one, every little kid goes and sits at the piano and does her little homework thing. So my turn, I go sit and I play, and I made a bunch of mistakes, and this teacher took the book and she threw it across the floor.
Ooh.
She yelled at me and she threw the book, and I
Uh,
still remember it just threw me into such shame.
mm,
I must be completely worthless. I was only about 4 years old,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I still remember the shame that I felt, or whatever I felt at
Mm,
that time. Now I know that was a moment of shame,
yeah.
so embarrassed that I
Yeah.
made these mistakes, and I was shamed in front of everybody. Everyone saw me making these mistakes. And just walking home by myself with
Mm,
tears gushing down my face.
um, yeah.
And luckily, I had a great mom, and my mom just was livid. She kept me home, and she walked to Auntie Mari's home where the lessons were going on. And she said, she was like, how dare you treat my daughter in that way? She's 4 years old and she just made a mistake. And for you to
Mm,
have thrown her book aside, and she was like, I will never send you to send my daughter to your class. And so, she was Mama Bear
that's
to,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah. Well, so did that, I know as a little four, those moments of shame uh, became like I became very aware of when another moment like that might occur, and I would sort of book it the other way because it's like the memory of it was so strong, and it tended to make me more withdrawn as a kid and less experimental. Unless I knew I was really good at what I was going to do, I would sit back. But how was that for you? Did that break your courage to step in and do things, or did it have an impact?
Interestingly, for I would say probably preschool, just sort of that age of maybe like 6 years of grade 1 to grade 12. In Sri Lanka, we don't have the US kind of high school system. We just go from grade 1 to grade 12. Um, there were certain ways in which I was very withdrawn. I'm just gonna hang back. I'm not gonna really bother with anybody and also not let anyone bother me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and just kind of hiding, yeah, just sort of hiding.
Mm-hmm.
But every so occasionally, I would also have these moments of bold taking action, like I would do some kind of artwork. Usually it involved artwork.
Oh.
That was very bold and courageous and
Mm.
expressive and just express myself and be utterly and sort of unashamedly and unabashedly proud of what I had created. I had
Beautiful.
definitely had moments like that.
Mm.
Um, but I do think that up until I was about 18, I was a withdrawn, moody, very moody kid. I was very moody.
So, and we'll say it's like how would you notice that? Like just the fluctuations and
The-
up and.
Yeah, I think for me, I still remember, which is such a sort of, it's so funny how true these systems are in many ways. I just had such a, even sort of looking down, which is something Enneagram fours do, is sort of look down, like kind of turn your nose up and look down on others,
Mhm.
sort of, idea. So even as a child, I really remember how if we were at somebody's birthday party or something, I would just go into my own corner and just do my own thing, keep myself occupied with
Mhm.
doing some art or reading a book or something like that. You will not find me playing with the other kids.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was I was probably scared that if I didn't know it at that time, but I think I was probably just protecting myself from feeling seen or being exposed or being
Mm.
shamed somehow by the
Yeah.
other kids. And so
Yeah.
I'm not gonna join them.
Yeah. 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 So, how would you describe, your evolution around coming forward and coming out more and getting more comfortable in your four spirit?
Yeah, I think it was really a sort of a real dedication to what I knew I was good at, which was
Mhm.
creative art, creativity. And so by the time I was about 16 years old, even sort of growing up in Sri Lanka, I already made up my mind. This is what I'm good at. Like I'm really good at art and creative
Mm. Mm.
fields. And my particular interest was in design, fashion design. And so I was very convinced that that's what I was going to do. So I did make some really bold moves, such as just without even telling my parents, I
Wow.
would go to figure out what would I need to do in order to get to the United States and study design.
Really?
Yeah, so I would
Wow.
go to what's called the American Center. It's usually every country has what's called an American Center, which is a part of the American consulate, the American embassy, and all that. So I found my way to places like that, and I started meeting with college, advisors who were in those places, and they'll say, well, if you want to go to a university in the US, you have to do this, this, this. So you have to do the TOEFL, which is a test that international students have to do to prove your English proficiency.
Hmm.
And I learned that you have to do something called the SATs. And so I would do all that really kind of very courageously and bravely on my own. And I started
Amazing.
applying to art schools in the US and I got into several of them and then I picked FIT and
Hmm.
I was so lucky that my parents were willing to support me and they really wanted me to nurture my creative
Hmm.
capabilities. So I
Hmm.
think the way that I, as a 4, without knowing anything about the Enneagram at the time, obviously, um, probably tapped into some of those one-ish
Mhm.
skills of
Mm,
just put
mm,
aside the fear and the kind of the fear of being ashamed or found out,
mhm,
and everyone will know who you really are kind of thing. I think I decided I know who I am.
mm.
With a certain degree of authenticity, I really believed in myself. And
That's awesome.
yeah, and I think it was, I suppose for a 4, it's probably really important to really identify what they're good at so that they don't have to experience shame around it. They can really just love
Mm.
expressing it fearlessly, unashamedly, unabashedly, just to be able to express that. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what a blessing to have that awareness at such a young age. So, so there's sometimes a story about fours, um, which is that they have a kind of orientation towards sometimes wanting someone to rescue them.
mm.
Uh, uh, and I wonder if there's you related to that. Was there any sort of themes like that in your life of hoping for
Yeah.
a rescuer?
Yeah, the way that I see that that has played out in my life is not necessarily that I'm waiting around for someone to rescue me, but rather that I have to get out of this so that I'm not going to experience the shame of becoming someone um not worthy somehow of being here, or this isn't working for me anymore. So for example, whenever I'm in a fix, I think I rescue myself, or like I somehow like force myself to get out of it, run
Hmm.
away, withdraw into
Mhm.
some other situation that will rescue me.
Oh, okay.
It's not necessarily someone who can rescue me. So I was starting to feel really horrible in Sri Lanka at a certain point. And
Hmm.
I think this whole thing about moving to the US was because the US will rescue me.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so the way I've also noticed it in my life is talked to so many type fours who felt really emotionally protective of their mothers, kind of
Mm,
like mom needs my support and dad better not mess with her, and
mm,
so they some I know for myself felt like I my mom needed me to save her emotionally at different times. But
mm.
did you have any of that dynamic? It sounds like you were sort of a mother bear for your mother when your dad was, not being at his best. But how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I was definitely much closer to my mom. Um, my dad was an Enneagram 1, I think. I don't
Mm.
know for sure. It's been a long time since he's been gone, but
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't say something perfectly, he would get angry. He would lose his temper.
Mm.
And I know that he was a surgeon.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah. And he would say things to me, even as a little girl. I still remember him saying, um, he was wonderful in so many ways, but I know that there are certain ways about him that just was intimidating to me because he was just too perfect. He
Yeah.
was just too perfect, and he expected everyone around him to be perfect. He was not afraid to point out what was wrong, you know.
Yeah.
So I remember, um, I don't know exactly how my sort of just because I was scared of him, I think that I was just more closer to my mom, and she would really be like the comforting space for me. And I still to this day, she is still around. I still to this day don't fully know what her type is, but I do think that potentially she is a 9.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
Mm-hmm.
that's also interesting as far as my mom and dad are concerned. They say 9s and 1s often find each other.
Mm-hmm.
So she may have been a 9 perhaps, but it was very a calming presence for me. And she liked the things that I liked. And so I just had a closer bond with her for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what was it like for you when you discovered you were a type 4? You
Mm.
remember that moment when the light
Yeah,
went on and you went, "Oh, I'm a 4."
yeah, yeah. I was just fascinated. It was such a powerful self-awareness tool that I think I just started noticing, oh, this is why I do this way.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I seem to really prefer certain kinds of restaurants, or this is why I tend to dress a certain way, or um like even this black turtleneck that I have on right now is, I think, like sometimes a kind of a weird four thing. Dogs and turtlenecks and I don't know what it is. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just started really, a lot of things just made sense to me once I knew that, yeah, I think it was very easy for me. I mean, some people struggle. And for me, it's like I read four and I'm like, oh my God, this is just completely me. Um, but yeah, I mean, just my love of arts and creativity and beauty and that refinement, and my melancholy suddenly made perfect sense. I loved my melancholy. Nobody does. It gave me like, once I learned that I'm a four and learned about the Enneagram, it gave me permission to just be okay with it. It's, you know what, if melancholy is what you're doing today, just do it. You don't need to worry about others having any judgments about it. If they want to, go ahead. Yeah. Certainly, I don't have to judge myself for that. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's awesome that you that you had acceptance around it. Like, it's just what we're doing today. Yeah. So there's also sometimes we hear about this idea about fours having a passion for being emotionally honest
Hmm.
and letting know what's really going on. And was that something that's been a theme for you through the course of your life? This telling
Yeah.
the emotional truth about what you're feeling or seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I'm also self-preservation for. So I think the self-preservation for my sort of stack is self-preservation, sexual, social. Social is sort of my blind spot, and I can sort of leverage on my sexual to work with my blind spots sometimes. But as a self-preserving four, I think I'm also said to be slightly the more cheerful of the three. So somewhat of a counter to the quintessential four. I think that's been helpful for me. So I'm emotionally honest, but I think I'm also, for the most part, I've also been appropriately practicing that. I don't think that I have been accused of sort of vomiting all my emotions all over the place, or, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I've had somewhat of a healthy relationship, I would say. Maybe my five wing helps me in that also, that I'm not um just sort of drowning in my emotions. It happens. I sometimes just wallow for sure.
Mhm.
Um, but I think there's somehow the mental part of me comes to my rescue, I think. It's just like, and the
Mhm.
one, there's a lot of people who have actually who think that I'm a one as well. I've been told that many times.
Mhm.
For one. So, but I know, not because I'm not as much in the body. I'm really much more in the heart, for emotional space.
Mhm.
And more than anger, it's the shame that always gets me. Uh,
Yeah. Well, it seems like the self-pres fours that that are my friends that tend to have a little quieter presence or quieter ambiance, more. Hmm, conserving. I mean, there's like, whereas, my stack is sexual, social, self-pres. So there was a time, well, erupting is something that might occur from time to time, or I erupt with emotional honesty, although it's over the many years on the planet, it's smoothed out quite a bit. When I was younger, I felt obligated to tell people exactly what I thought. I made many errors in the process, but I thought I was doing them a service, of course. Uh, but I wasn't. I was just reacting. So I just wondered about that for you, because I think the other piece is probably, um, it seems like self-pres fours, when it comes to emotional honesty, are more strategic. Like, is this the right time? I remember Don Reesel just seemed to have a way of just waiting for the right time to share something, and which maybe the self-pres, maybe an innate wisdom, but the idea of being true to yourself, that sense of, like, how has that played out in your life? Like, what is there a story that resonates for you about
Oh
being
yeah.
true to yourself?
Oh yeah. I think it's a big one. As much as I was, for example, even as a young woman getting into the design industry, fashion design, I was in fashion design from this perspective of don't ever just follow what is fashionable, you know. It was
Mm-hmm.
more about do what makes you feel like you. Do what makes you feel or dress in a way that really helps you express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just put something on your body just because that's the fashionable thing to do or that's the trend right now.
Mm-hmm.
So being true to myself, I think was probably, when you learned about the Enneagram 4, that was something that really somehow resonated for me big time because I've gone towards what felt true for me. And I have often very easily walked away from things without any fear that this isn't for me. Like going to a party or like I'll hang around for a little bit. Going to parties for Enneagram 4s is always interesting because we kind of tend to hang back and just watch. But, you know, and I'm very comfortable walking away if I'm like, all right, I tried and I think I'm done. It's like this is not my jam here right now. So I'm happy I gave myself a chance, but if I'm to be true to myself, I know that I'm really unhappy. This is like not doing anything for me. This is just like meh. So I'll be very honest in that way because being true to myself somehow was more important. Um, I have gotten into trouble sometimes, but where I think authenticity is so important that, for example, I've shared things in organizational context sometimes, like sending an email that was shared just with me, for example. I remember like sending it to a whole group because I felt like, see, this thing that's happening is not authentic. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to be more authentic about it. So I want you all to know. And that was just highly inappropriate. That was my need to be authentic, doesn't mean everybody else needs to be, subject to that somehow.
Yeah.
Um, so I think on occasion, probably I've done things that are just really inappropriate. Another way that I find myself really in the negative sense of getting stuck in that place of, well, I just need to be true to myself is if I'm moody sometimes, if I'm just feeling moody, I'm just stubbornly moody. And it really brings down the energy of the whole group. I'm gonna bring you all down. It's horrible. So again, way more awareness of that now. So that sense that some people have to walk on eggshells around a 4,
Mm-hmm.
definitely subjected other people to that. It's like someone put a gun to my head and then kill me. I have done that to people.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone. It is interesting that. that kind of emotionally intense mood really impacts people. It's like you're emitting a black tar that gets into people's souls, and all of a sudden you've changed the entire climate,
Yeah.
and everybody's getting sucked dry of their spirit, and I have done that myself. I'm guilty of that, and less prone to do that, but I really, as one of my teachers says, you need to take responsibility for your emotional affect and how it's touching people.
Hmm.
You can't just let it fly out there or be unconscious about it. And and I can remember in the beginning feeling like, you want me to restrain my truth, as
Yeah.
though, like, are you kidding me? And he says, yes, I am saying that. That's what a conscious person does when it's not helping people. They reel it in. So yeah, so I know what that's like for sure. Um,
Yeah, and the other thing also in relation to sort of emotional authenticity, is that you just use the harmonics world of emotional intensity. I now know why I sometimes really like the emotional intensity of the 6 and the 8, for example.
mhm.
Uh, I get really upset sometimes when people aren't activated. How can you, like, did you just see what happened? Or, or like, oh my God, politically, I'm always like paying attention to politics sometimes, often.
Mhm.
Like if something happens and some people are like, how do you not know that? How can that not if affect you? Like that's impossible. You should be as worked up as I am and emotionally charged as I am. It's like you're just so like you're a cop out, emotional self be known. That's just such a cop out. So, but sometimes it's also like, I mean, honestly, there's when I look at the news today on the day that you and I are speaking, is it something like 17,000 people at this time dead in Turkey and Syria?
Amazing.
And like it's I nowhere near that, and yet it is felt profoundly,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is so, in some ways, I don't understand how there are so many who don't fully get it. It's like how
Yeah.
can you not be completely crushed by this reality that is
Yeah.
true?
Yeah.
7,000 dead bodies. But that's only the beginning. I mean, it's by now, I think that was in the morning. So right now at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's probably gone over 20,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do appreciate the emotionally intense type. There's something about it. It's like, woo, you can feel it. This is good. I can remember one time at the Enneagram Institute, Linda was a type 6 and I'm a type 4. And we were trying to let Don and Russ and Gail know what was going on. And they weren't like feeling it. And so we would amp it up more. And then finally, Russ said, I think we have enough emotional intensity. And we must remember that there's positive outcome and competency that we can look at. So let's move over to positive outcome and just look at what are all the good things we're doing and going, well,
Yeah.
so it's like easy to get addicted to almost as a way of being when I'm feeling insecure or when, there is, you need, there is a lot to be moved by that's happening on the planet right now that is quite challenging and in many different ways. I mean, every day in the news there's some new bizarre thing that has happened, and I go, okay, I need to stay away from the news for a while because I'm getting a little bit too charged. So Yeah. So.
Or it's also the other side of that for me is that if there is a lot of emotion, I actually will stay with it and stay with it and stay with it. So I have a very clear memory of when I was about maybe 22, 23 or so. There was a TV program in Sri Lanka, which this is, I guess in Sri Lanka back then, maybe now they do, but back then they weren't putting like trigger warnings or anything like that about what images they were just gonna show.
Hmm.
So there was a video by some, I guess some animal activists maybe, and they showed the butchering of a cow.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Mm.
most people would have turned that thing off. Um,
Mhm.
but I remember telling myself, you have to watch this.
Mm.
You have to watch. You have to look directly into the fear of this animal because
Mm.
you know that fear. And
Mm.
that animal is already dead, but I'm gonna die with him.
Mm. Yeah.
Uh, share your pain with me. I'm gonna share your pain with you.
Yeah.
And just I watched every step of how that
Mm.
cow was butchered,
Mm.
how
Yeah.
it was drawn into the slaughterhouse,
Mm.
and the
Terrible.
tears gushing down this animal's face.
Oh, how
And I
sad.
have never forgotten, and I always tell myself you should never forget.
Yeah.
You should
Yeah.
remember that feeling, that
Yeah.
pain always.
Well, that's a really beautiful way to hold it. There's a sacredness to that. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So, can you say anything about, well, for myself, when I learned about my type, I discovered that even though I knew a lot about my type didn't care. It just kept acting, doing what it did, its habit. I figured, I've got all the information. I should be good to go. And it said, good for you. And then it just did what it did. So, that's what got me on a quote unquote path of trying to become more conscious, uh, healing my monkey mind through meditation and my heart center through healing experiences, grieving, and sensing my body, trying to become awake in all three centers. And that included, diamond heart work and Gurdjieff work and other things of that nature. And I just wondered what, if you have a path or something that's been most helpful for you.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think as you know, also most people wouldn't really know about this, but I think for me, this thing called integral theory is really what has been such an incredibly helpful sense-making tool for me. And I really sort of tend to see the world through the eyes of integral. And so, like Ken Wilber's work or other developmentalists like Robert Keegan, Suzanne Goiter, uh,
Hmm.
those teachings have been really helpful for me that also get me a little bit more in my five wing.
Mm-hmm.
So I refer to our, like with each of our Enneagram types, I consult with who I refer to as the general counsel.
Mm-hmm.
Is for me, for both of us, it's the one, the two, the three, and the five, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So our kind of
The touch points.
the touch points. Yeah, I refer to them as the general counsel. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a practice. It's like, given where I'm stuck or in my personality, like really stuck in the ego, um, I think it has really helped me to remember to use the Enneagram in that way of connecting with the touch points.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm isolating myself from the rest of the world and withdraw, um I'll really just go to the two and like I know that my disintegration point is two, but actually the two is really good at making connections and calling a friend and being so much more social with people, again the social being my blind side.
Yeah.
So I really go to the Enneagram a lot.
Hmm.
Other things that I just love are just, just to continuously create beauty and things that help me get out of my sort of stuckness in personality is to use things that are leverage on certain things that are about my personality that are actually good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's uh, I've been also drawn to sort of cathartic kind of healing processes. More so, one was which I think was made just exactly for the type 4 is the Hoffman process.
Oh yeah, I've
Uh,
done that.
I'm telling you, that's like four. Four, you work on the four energy, But yeah, that and I also went through something called primal therapy for many,
Mm.
many years, and then breath work and things like that. So yeah, but the Hoffman process, it really had the four intensity to it, which I love. I said this is home base. I mean, this was made for me. So all the wailing and screaming and pounding and all
Yeah.
of that. Just so you went through that yourself, and how was it for you?
Well, I will say the whole bashing thing that happens in the Hoffman process to begin with, and this might have been also a little bit of the cultural thing for me. Hold
Mm-hmm.
on, I have a little friend here who wants to join
Uh, yeah.
scratching my foot here. This is Duncan.
Oh, what a sweetie. Oh.
Um, but yeah, for me, I don't know if you will relate to this as a four. Interestingly, anything that looks or I'm perceiving to be overdone, I sort of cringe at that also.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I still remember being at, this was so funny. I was at Esalen at Russ's 5 day
Mm-hmm.
Enneagram thing. And very first day, during the break, he played some music. During a short break, he played some music, and some of the folks in the workshop kind of jumped up to the middle and started dancing, and they were being goofy and all that. And I remember just like, this is really cringy. Like, oh, it was so weird. Like the overly positive.
Yeah.
Similarly, or I'm perceiving it as overly positive, overly cheerful, but also overly dramatic also turns me off. And because I think I'm seeing that as not authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think culturally coming from Asia, this Hoffman process idea of sort of bashing your parents, which is like the starting point,
Yeah.
was like, oh gosh, no, I can't do that. I mean, these are people that I tremendously respect, and I can't bash them with a baseball bat. What are you talking about? And then I'm like watching everyone else in the room just like going at it and screaming and shouting. It took me probably until the day before the last day when I gave myself permission to like really get out of like Namali, just do it. Just like put away your, you don't have to be perfect and like this image, whatever, I don't know what it was, but I had to do a lot of giving myself permission to go do something that I was judging to be silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you probably weren't the only one, because I think, since I had done primal therapy for many years, it was just like what you do. You've got a feeling, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a real culture breaker, even for the United States. But yeah, so that's interesting. That's interesting, and I'm sure you were not alone. I know one of my friends said I would not bash.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bash my mother, and so she didn't.
Yeah. Me, it was more about something that I somehow saw as silly. Like it's like
Yeah, yeah, it's a
all
silly
this
thing.
screaming and shouting, and this is so silly. You guys are behaving like children. It's like And also similarly, I'm not feeling drawn to doing that. Therefore, I'm
Yes. Yeah.
self
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
gonna follow the Hoffman process, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's not
I
true
did
to,
everything else, yeah,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
loved it also. I actually really loved the Hoffman process. I still tell people and even my clients that you should go do the Hoffman process, you know,
Yeah.
and if like me, if you struggle with the bashing, it's okay. Give
Hmm.
yourself some time
Yeah.
and give it a try at the time that you feel like it's okay for you to try that.
Yeah. 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 Well, because there's so much more to it than that particular piece.
Yeah.
Although that was one of my favorites. It's funny. Well, so we've covered a lot of great material. Is there anything that you would like to say more about the Type 4 that, even for, beloved fours who are, in high school or grade school or, or young fours who are, just discovering the melancholy mood swings? I mean, you've already really given us a lot of beautiful wisdom, but anything you would like to
Mm.
add
Yeah.
to it?
I think I think really learn to um pay attention to how shame is holding you back. And as a way of dealing with that, I would really say something that I said earlier is really try to unashamedly and unabashedly identify what you're truly good at.
Mm,
And really just find a way, find a platform, whether it is Instagram. And if your unique talent is taking beautiful photographs of the sunrise, then own it fully, embrace it,
beautiful.
claim it
Mm,
as yours, and that's your genius, that's your unique skill. And
mm,
so unafraid, just start your sunrise photography Instagram account, even if nobody else follows it.
mm,
Be religiously committed to that and express that. So I think
mm,
that's something that I would say. The other thing is, I think, constantly communicate with that general counsel. The touch points are,
mm,
they each have so much to teach us,
mm,
and to learn from that.
mm,
Um, yeah, I think those two things come up for me as and definitely I think the places where Enneagram 4s struggle are painful places. I mean, for every type, our passion is painful.
mhm,
So I think just to remind ourselves to be kind in the face of that, and at the same time to really trust that you are strong and you
mm.
can be authentic to yourself and also shake it off, and like the
Yeah,
next time you go to a conference or the seminar and you're sitting back because I don't know if I belong here yet, shake it off, get up, go
yeah,
find.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. I really, really appreciate everything you've shared. Thank you so much, and just you reflected a lot of acceptance and kindness for your patterns as opposed to, beating yourself up. And that to me is so important for relaxing the patterns. If I'm not beating them up, then I'm not adding more suffering to something that's already a bit painful. So just a beautiful perspective. So yeah, well, thank you, and just really great to spend time with you. And um, I will turn the recording off,
Mhm.
and